everybody, it's Watto here, bringing you another Wattos Weekly, and this week I'm not going to talk about football because there isn't any. As far as I'm concerned, international matches are international matches and Birmingham City matches are Birmingham City matches, and I'm only really interested in the boys in blue. So I thought I'd tell you a bit about what it was like going to football matches in the 60s, okay? My first game was actually in 1959, which was October, and it was a friendly against Valencia, which clubs had just got newly installed floodlights. So if they hadn't got enough games to play, they wanted to get their money's worth. So they invite these top-name continental teams to play. The European Cups and stuff was going on then. Well, the European Cup was. The Cup Winners' Cup started a bit later. And, of course, the Fairs Cup. And so the reason why my dad took me was because he thought, well, there wouldn't be a massive crowd and, you know, I'd be comfortable and I'd be able to see and all the rest of it. So my route to the ground, as I say, was by bus. So we used to walk up to the Wagon and Horses, up to the dual carriageway at the top, and wait for the bus there. Now, interestingly, in those days, there used to be buses that had a limited route, and they would be put on specially for football specials. Now, I used to stand waiting for the bus coming up from the Wheat Sheaf and the airport or whatever. But on match days, the bus would turn round at the Wagon and Horses turn off and come round and up the hill and pick us up there. And that was either the 60A or the 58A that only did that on match days. So this was where the adventure starts. Now, early 60s, evening matches kicked off at 7:15, right? And then as the decade went on, they put them back to 7:30, and eventually quarter to 8. So we get on that bus about an hour 45 minutes before the kick-off. Now, by the time we got to the Swan, it was full. You'd chock out. You were standing up. If you were a kid, you get kicked up. Give the old man your seat, that sort of thing. So you'd be standing there. And, of course, all the way down the Coventry Road, the Swan underpass wasn't there then. So you'd had to get round there and down the hill, all the way through Small Heath. And it would chug along, and you think, we're never going to get there. Excitement was already, but, you know, we're going to miss the kickoff. But we didn't. We never did. We always got there. Now, getting off the bus, where the bus stops now in front of St Andrews is where it stopped then. But instead of being a Morrison's and a great big huge car park, there were houses there. There was a pub on the corner of Cattle Road called, come on, quickly, yes, the Greenaway. And there was another one 100 yards further up the road called, I forget. But there was two pubs within 50 yards of each other. And between those two pubs were houses, right? And you used to cross the road and you'd walk through the back-to-back houses, and it was pitch black. There was, apart from the lights in the windows of the houses, it was pitch black. And I held on to me dad, you know, so I didn't fall down. And we get across the road, and the old Cattle Road entrance, which now houses the wonderful mural of Trevor and Jude, that was covered. It was like an office block, and you went through a tunnel towards the turnstiles. Now it got crowded in there, and in those days. Now it sounds like a million years ago. I mean, it's not that long ago, but my dad, said, gave me my sixpence and put me in the boys' queue. And he got a shilling and went to the men's queue. And he would wait for me to get to the turnstiles on the other side, which is how we used to get in. The other side of if you wanted the toilet, you went down underneath the turnstiles. And it was, again, there was not a light on. It was pitch black, and you'd wander around with your flies open, trying to find somewhere to pee, and you could hear running water, and you could hear the turnstiles clicking above your head, and you were lucky to get out of there with somebody not peeing down your leg. But anyway, out we go, and down on the court. We spent most of the first years of my football watching life on that Cattle Road corner, because you could, as a youngster, you could stand on there and look out and see the whole pitch. Now then, that particular match, the first one I went to, we lost 3-2 to Valencia. My dad says, "Come on, we got to go." 5 minutes before the end, he wanted me out the door to catch the bus. We might score. We're 3-2 down. Might score. Anyway, grab onto the bus, and he went back out the Cattle Road entrances, round the corner by the Greenway pub, and up the street. And the buses would come out of the bus station, which is still there, right? They'd fill up, and off you go. And then as soon as one was filled up, another one would come out, and basically the queue was, they just kept coming until there was not needed anymore. And you were home, as long as you were out before the end of the game, you were home in 20 minutes. So that was how it was. Now, what else was different? Look at this kit here, right? This is actually a copy of what was actually the shirt for the 58-59 season when Jeff Hall died. The big Birmingham badge, fantastic. I really wish we could get that. But the first match I saw, the new fancy fashion was V-neck shirts, short sleeves, really smart, white shorts, blue and white socks. Fantastic. Really looked the business. Now, I saw quite a few games during that season, and it got very, very cold during that winter. The pitch was lousy. It was like a swamp. And the players complained that these fancy new shirts, they were cold. So they went back to these shirts with the long sleeves, and we finished that season off going back to this shirt. Now, there wasn't a new kit every year. The fashions changed slightly, so you probably every 3 years or so there would be a difference. In that early 60s time, we went from this to the V-neck, and then eventually to the round neck with the long sleeves. So, and that sort of stuck for a long, long time. There were slight variations towards the end of the 60s until we got into the 70s, and people, the idea of having new kits a bit more often than that started to come in. But nobody sold any replicas of them. It was just the way it was. The replica shirt was, not even thought of. And me personally, I did eventually con my nan into knitting me a bobble hat and a scarf. Now, my dad, he never wore any colours. No, grown men didn't do that. It was, what's the matter with you? Are you 8? The idea of having a bobble hat and scarf was for kids only. And there was a football crowd in the 60s was a very uncolourful sight. Maybe for a big cup match. I remember at the semi-final in Villa Park against the Albion, there was lots of colour because it was a special match. But no run-of-the-mill. No, you have the rattles. That would be significant. But wearing your colours was a bit passé, to be honest. Only people who weren't really football fans would dress up like that. Okay, what else was different? Well, as I say, midweek game, 7:15 kick-off, so I mean, I was all right, came home from school, had my tea, whatever, but my dad was, he'd fly in, swallow his tea, have a quick shave, and we'd be out again. And that was one of the reasons people complained that they couldn't do it in time. So we then went to the 7:30 kick-off and eventually the 7:45. Okay. St Andrews at the time, was probably, certainly in the West Midlands, was one of the most redeveloped pitch grounds in the Midlands, mainly because it had been bombed, flattened, burnt to the ground, so it had to be renewed. The roof was mended on the Sporting Cop, and another one was extended onto the Tilton. So our ground was probably more developed than most in the area, but the basic shape and design hadn't changed since the 20s. Certainly across the road at where, their ground was developed just after the First World War. They hadn't had any changes done to it in all that time. If you went to the Whitton end, you had to climb up a grass bank, and if it was muddy, it was treacherous. But anyway, there was no stand at the railway end in those days. There was a small standing area, and the old steam trains used to come along, and the joke was that the pitch would be covered in railway smoke, and Blues would nip down and score while the other team couldn't see. It's more likely the other way around, to be honest. In fact, I did go to a game in about 62, 63. It was a Port Vale Cup tie. I stood behind the Tilton, and you couldn't see the other end of the pitch. And we got beat 2-1 by Port Vale. Third round of the Cup, another Cup disaster. And didn't see any of the goals, They were all scored at the railway end, and I was down the Tilton, never saw one of them. And the only fact I know they scored because there was a cheer or not. Okay, so refreshments. What refreshments? What do you want to eat and drink at a football match for? You go to watch the football. Eating and drinking was just not considered. Certainly not beer. If you wanted to drink before the game, we got the Greenway and the other pub, which I can't remember the name of. 10 yards from the entrance. If you want to go and drink there. So it was never a problem. The only thing that they did bring out in the 60s was some poor bloke with a hot. It was like an air tank, and it was full of tea, and he'd get a cup, and he there you are, sir, sixpence, thank you very much. It was dangerous, this man walking through a crowd of 40,000 people. He trips up with hot tea stuck to his back. He was in and that was squashed very quickly. Now then, this is I'm coming to the end of my first part of this football in the 60s. As I said, tenner for me to get in, shilling for me dad. Might have been 1 and 3 at one stage, and I remember it going up. The other thing was the price that you paid could vary on which entrance you went in. The Cattle Road was sort of the middle range. It was actually dearer behind the goal at the Tilton, and the railway end was slightly cheaper. Now, don't ask me why, but it was. And the gates were, so you couldn't go from a cheap area to an expensive area. The gates between these areas were shut. Now, people used to climb over and all sorts of things. But I don't know why. Never had a seat in those days. Goodness me, it was only posh people that had seats. That might have cost me 2 and 6. Whew. That's 12.5p for you other people. Okay, right. Next time we'll talk about cup finals, because in my first 5 years of watching of Blues life. We got to 2 First Cup finals, an FA Cup final, and a League Cup final. That ain't bad for a team that never finished out the bottom 6. Anyway, more of that later. God bless you all.